Well, welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the workforce. And we believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations. Uh, Team members' well-being, reward, and career development are all essential to a happy and healthy workforce environment. So this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies that top executives, professionals, and talent managers all enjoy. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to my panel, but Shar just suddenly disappeared off the screen. So hopefully she'll rejoin us in just a moment. But Shar should join us as she is broadcasting from down in Mexico at her home down there. She is a strategic human resource consultant that helps coach leaders and so forth on really living the life and ensuring that they're balancing a work-life style. So we're happy to have Shar here. She's joining up just now. So, but our core guest today is Richard Horwath. And so today's discussion is going to pivot on the art of steering leadership into uncharted territories with strategic mastery. So join us as Rich. He is a dynamic leader and CEO of the Strategic Thinking Institute. And so Rich is not just a best-selling author and an acclaimed facilitator. He's a pioneer in the landscape of strategic thinking, guiding 250,000 leaders worldwide with a keen eye on setting direction and creating competitive advantage. Rich transforms the complex into actionable strategies for leaders. And so it's great to have somebody on your side that can deliver that sense of clarity. So as you can see here in the bio, if you look at the show notes, Rich he's really been on a lot of prestigious business publications such as Fast Company and Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and so forth. Also, frequenting on television as well, ABC, CBS, Fox TV. As you can see, we're really fortunate to have Rich with us today, and so I'm super excited to have this conversation specifically around strategic fitness and his new book, Strategic. So welcome, Rich.
Sam, Shar, great to be both with you today. Thanks for having me.
So as we kick off, I know that you have your book Strategic, but you also have a whole core of other books that you've launched over the years. And so can you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your story? How did you get into this business of being a knowledge expert in this area and leading people to perform better in their work?
Well, thanks, Sam. So, roughly 25 years ago, and I know I'm really dating myself now, I was working at a marketing firm developing strategic plans for healthcare companies. And we were facilitating a strategic planning session. And at one of the coffee breaks, one of the managers came up to me and said, Rich, I just had my performance review. And my manager said, I'm way too tactical. I need to be more strategic. How do I do that? And going back 25 years ago, most of the books on strategy were really around corporate strategy, business unit strategy, really at that company level. And so it was that light bulb moment for me that said, you know what? There isn't really a roadmap to help the individual leaders and managers be strategic day in and day out. So that really ignited my passion for the topic of thinking strategically and planning strategically. So I did a lot of research. I worked for 5 years as a graduate school professor and did a lot of research and then started writing and wrote my first book. And then about 2 years later, launched my own company. So I've been in business now for about 22 years. And really my passion is helping the individual leaders and executive teams think, plan, and act strategically, not once a year during the strategic planning process, but every day.
So, so and through that journey, just the word strategic itself has kind of it's kind of a buzzword. So when you talk about strategic and how that applies to leadership or leaders today, how do you define that?
Yeah, Sam, it's a really important question because research has shown over the last 10 years, there's 91 different definitions of strategy and strategic. So, generally we don't have a consensus on what that means. And if you look in the dictionary for strategic, it says of or relating to strategy, which is, about as helpful as an umbrella in a hurricane. So when I think about strategic, I think about it as possessing insight that leads to advantage. And if we think about it in that capacity, we can say some things are strategic, like a person or a plan. Both of those can possess insight that helps us create advantage. But there's lots of other things, and you bring up a great point, Sam. We throw the word strategic in front of lots of other terms, and it really dilutes the meaning and importance of the term strategic. So again, if we think about possessing insight that leads to advantage, that's really what we're talking about with the word strategic. And when we think about an insight, it's really a learning that leads to new value. So again, when we're talking about strategic, it means we're continuously generating learnings that are giving us the ability to create value for the people that we serve, both internally and externally.
And it seems that, of course, there needs to be a plan around being strategic, but it first starts with having the appropriate mindset for leaders. Would you agree?
Yeah, the mindset is absolutely critical because the reality is we live in a very action-oriented world today where everybody's on this activity treadmill. We're running and running, going and going. We've got emails and texts and things flying around. And oftentimes we're acting like a bumper car at a carnival. We're bouncing from one thing to the next with no rhyme or reason. So to your point, the mindset shift is really important, Sam. We've got to be able to step back out of the day-to-day and really think about three things. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how could we do it differently or better than we are today?
And so, Shar, I know that you work with a lot of leaders, and mindset and making sure that they have that work-life balance is quite important. How does this resonate with your thinking?
Well, hey, I don't want to date myself either here, Rich, but I remember as a junior HR manager and I was transferred to an HR business partner, which was actually a lateral transition. I know that doesn't sound like it is, but what's interesting is that my vice president was telling me, Shar, you need to be more strategic. And was actually a female, but that's how she talked to me. You need to be more strategic. And I remember going, okay, I'm like, 29 years old and I'm thinking, I'll be strategic, and I was new in my career, and as an HR business partner, we're very much expected to work with leaders to, as you say, transition the mindset. However, I'm later learning as I've gotten through my career that competencies or support are very much essential. And you have, like you say, a tactical competency or a strategic competency, and you really have to work on that muscle. It's really a skill set. I'm very creative. I'm very much a visionary, so I kind of embraced that. But so the challenges is really having that conversation, because I felt like sitting down with my leaders and my vice presidents and executives, I'm trying to figure out what all the strategic is and how that applies to our business, which is in turn I need to have a more business mindset, an operational mindset. But for an HR leader, we're quote unquote the people. So, it's not necessarily always ingrained in our mindset or psyche, because we get fooled in thinking we are in the people business when we're really more operational than you think. So, how would you take going back to my maybe less seasoned mindset and coach and mentor someone that really needs to build that competency? And what would be your approach and how to help that person be more strategic in operations?
Yeah, that's a great point, Sharon. I love the backstory that you shared there too, because I
I
think it's
always have a
relevant.
backstory.
Yeah, it's so relevant for a lot of us. I think the first thing is a leader out there, when we're going to look at our people and think about are they tactical or strategic, we need to be more specific. And I'm a big fan and big believer, and I know a lot of your work too focuses on behaviors, changing people's behaviors. So when we're going to give people feedback around their strategic, operational, tactical ability, we need to be more specific and relate it to behavior. So it's one thing for me to say, or for you to say, you know, Rich, you're too tactical. You need to be more strategic. However, if you would share with me, you know, Rich, I see you're reacting to the clients internally, and you're not proactively sitting down with them to talk about what their goals are, what their needs are. So I want you to be less reactive, and I want you to be more intentional in setting a regular cadence meeting with those internal stakeholders, your business partners, so that you can be on the front of the curve and be more proactive with them, so that we're not in an order taking mentality, which a lot of times we find ourselves in if we're in an internal function like HR, IT, operations, finance. So that would be the main thing I'd mention to folks, is really be specific on what behaviors do you want to see from them operationally, strategically, tactically, and that's going to give them a much better, a much clearer roadmap to being a better performer.
That is super relevant to a lot of people today, and I'd like to dive into that just a little bit more. And before we talk about strategic fitness, is really earning a seat at the table as a strategic leader. And so, a lot of people that are listening in, we have, of course, leaders that are founders of organizations and C-suite that are listening in. And then we also have senior HR practitioners that are trying to be more strategic in their position, but they need to earn that seat at the table. So in organizations that are typically think of human resources or the people operations as a tactical function, how can those professionals elevate their game to win a part, win a place at the table there, to be more influential? What are your thoughts, Rich?
Yeah, so I would focus on 3 A's for people. And I use this 3A framework to be strategic. So if you're an HR leader or a founder of a company, we want to be thinking about 3 A's: acumen, allocation, and action. So acumen is, what's the new insight? What's the new value in this situation? So whether you're meeting with your staff, whether you're doing a one-on-one meeting, you're meeting with an external customer, you always want to ask yourself after every interaction, what's the new value here that I can provide, deliver, or create? Because again, too often, if we're reactive, we're not thinking about new value. We're thinking about fulfilling old needs. So we want to think about proactively, what did I learn in that conversation that can help me be more proactive in creating value? The second A then is allocation. Again, a lot of times, if you're an internal leader, we're spreading ourselves way too thin. We're trying to be a team player. And so we don't say no to anyone. Everything's a priority. But if everything's a priority, then we're going to spread ourselves so thin that we're not really adding value. So one of the dirty secrets of being strategic, especially for you internal leaders, HR, IT, finance, operations, is you have to be able to say no to some requests. Now, here's the other trick though. I don't recommend saying no to people, because no one likes to hear the word no, especially internally, and politically that could be a problem for us. So what I would suggest is, think about, what are the trade-offs that you would have to make in order to fulfill that request? So if you get someone comes to you and says, look, I need you to create an emotional intelligence workshop at our national sales meeting in 2 weeks. Holy cow, that's 2 weeks to do a new workshop. So instead of saying, no, we can't do that, and then the internal leader for marketing or sales walks away and says, well, you know, he's not a team player, we can say, yes, we can do that. Here's what I need to stop doing. So I'm going to have to stop working on these items. I'm going to need X amount of resources from you. I'm going to need this amount of time in your calendar. I'm going to need to meet with these 5 people. So you want to identify, what are all of the trade-offs that you're making and they're making in order to fulfill this request. And a lot of times then that will get people to reset and understand that the request is either too time conscious, or it's something that was going to require too many resources, and they'll actually maybe pull back the request. So again, we've got to be able to focus as an internal leader and say no, and do so by saying yes and then giving them the trade-offs. And then the third piece of the third A is action. So we need to think about what's my priority. Again, a lot of the leaders I work with say they're frustrated because the senior management team, whether it's the CHRO or the CEO, COO, they have too many priorities. So we're not being effective in any couple areas. So again, we want to think about those three A's. Acumen, what's the new value I can provide based on this interaction? Allocation, what are the trade-offs I need to make? And then action, what is my priority going to be? So I think if we keep those three A's in mind, it gives us a way to trigger that ability to be more strategic from a mindset and behavior standpoint.
Okay. Why didn't I not meet you like Rich, 7, 8 years ago? As I was also a leader that kept building on top of all these things, I ended up being the in charge of the learning and development department on top of my other roles. And one of the things that was the charges is to build business acumen in the business. And I was asked, how do we build business acumen in this large healthcare system for that particular region? And so the idea was, well, let's just bring in all these executives to talk about, what is marketing, what is operations, what is, and trying to do these like talking events. So, and I had many, so I see that in your books here, I haven't read them, I have to admit that, but you talk about what it entails for a leader. And I do recall, because I was a strategic talent management person for the company, and I was told to get the business acumen up, but I was unable to articulate exactly what is acumen, what is action, what's the second one? I was unable to have the wording or even just my own business acumen to be a credible activist of an HR professional, to speak the language in order to translate in the learning development space. So I kind of reflect back, had I had your books and maybe your mindsets here, I could have probably resonated differently. So reflecting on, again, my backstory, how could I have done that differently in an operational sense of learning and development to help my leaders build that strategic competency?
Yeah, so the first thing, Shar, and it's a great point because I think a lot of us are challenged with that ability to kind of bring it all together and do it concisely. So I think the first thing is we have to have a common language for strategy. And as I mentioned earlier, 91 different definitions, people in marketing, sales, finance, HR, all have different ideas. So we have to get on that proverbial same page as to what is strategy. And I go back to, because again, if we think about mindset, we think about being strategic, everything is going to manifest itself, hopefully, in a plan, right? So HR is going to have a plan. The founding CEO is going to have a plan. We're all going to have a plan. But the thing we have to come back to is a good plan is always going to answer just two questions. What are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to do it? Right? So what are we trying to achieve? And how are we going to do it? And so to me, that's really where we all need to start. Because again, one of the issues I see oftentimes is that people in companies, even smaller companies, are operating in silos. They're not talking to each other. They're not aligned on strategies. And so at the end of the year, there's a lot of disconnects. There's a lot of miscommunication and missed opportunities. So one of the things I'd recommend is for anyone, get your leaders in a room at different levels and talk about what is strategy. Let's get a common framework, a common definition. I like to use, to answer those two questions of a plan, I like to use the oldest framework known to man, which is the GHOST framework: goals, objectives, strategies, tactics. And this goes all the way back 2,500 years ago to Sun Tzu, the Chinese general and philosopher, because strategy started in the military arena. So use that GHOST framework as one place to start. Goals and objectives answer the what question. What are you trying to achieve? Strategy and tactics answer that how question. How are you going to achieve it? So that's really where I would start, is get people in a room, give them a white paper that clearly outlines the definitions, have them practice writing those things down, and then have them talk to each other about, here are my goals, here are my objectives and strategies. Then you're going to start to build that alignment.
Those are some great tools, but I have to say one thing, Rich, is when most of our listeners out there, after consuming a show like this and hearing your expertise, people often take action, they binge on it, and say, okay, let's do this, and then they often lose momentum, akin to kind of like a New Year's resolution, right? When you get ready, it's like, okay, we're going to do this, and then it kind of falls off, which comes into the mind, the thought of strategic fitness. And so, how can our leaders out there ensure that they have that rigor to practice that strategic mindset on a daily basis? What do we need to do there?
Yeah, Sam, it's a great point. And there's one universal truth. If we do anything once a year, whether it's golf, the guitar, we talked about pickleball earlier. If you do any of those things once a year, you are not going to be very good at it. And the same can be said for strategy. If we only do strategy once a year during the planning process for a week or two, and then it goes away for 11 and a half weeks, we're not going to be strategic. So the idea, to your point, of strategic fitness has its corollary with physical fitness. The average CEO exercises for 45 minutes a day. So she spends 45 minutes a day exercising physically. But then we have to ask ourselves, how much time are we really investing in being strategic and practicing, as Shar talked about earlier, building that muscle, practicing that skill set. So again, one of the things we need to challenge ourselves with is, number one, what does being strategic look like in our world? So if I'm a CHRO, what does that look like? Well, it means I'm going to be meeting intentionally and regularly with my internal business partners to talk about what their strategies are. So what do their strategies look like? And then where does our team fit into designing strategy? But also, if I'm a CHRO, I want to set our own strategy. So again, too often I see internal leaders abdicating their responsibility for strategy by saying, well, that's the CEO's job, or that's the brand team's job to come up with the strategy. We just support them. That's not true. The mindset is everyone in your organization is a strategist, because strategy is the allocation of resources, time, talent, and budget to achieve your goals. So every person in your organization has time and talent and maybe budget. How they use that time and talent every day is actually going to be your real strategy. So if I'm a salesperson and I'm out there every day selling on low price, low price, low price, that's my company strategy, even if our marketing team says we're the premium brand in the industry and we're the highest price. So we have to understand that the main thing we need to consider is, what is our focus? And again, that has to come from alignment. So again, it's really deciding, as a CHRO, for instance, what are the internal stakeholder strategies? What are the strategies our team is developing? And then let's all have those conversations so that we're all on the same page and we're all developing a plan that fits together.
Well, Rich, this is really resonating with me, because I think one of our next questions is about how to assess the current level of strategic fitness for our leaders, and also how do we focus on what to improve upon. And I think you gave me a real aha, because on a personal level, I did do a meme only about 2 weeks ago, and it's kind of a silhouette of me, and I said, I am fit because my fat cells are strong. I create memes. I know I'm a little hokey, but then I was thinking of my little meme, because my fat cells are strong. Well, maybe I'm exercising the wrong part of my body. Maybe I need to be strengthening more. And then back to my original story, when I didn't know how to get, business acumen up and going. I think I love your concept about let's understand what strategic is. Let's understand our level of strategic abilities and competencies. Let's understand what we need to improve on, and quit focusing on the fat cells and focus on the muscle to truly grow our business. So I'm sorry, I always have a story, but I mean, I really resonate with that. So our ways of assessing the fitness aspect of our leaders, I mean, how do you assess that competency? Because I mean, we had competency assessment surveys, so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that it needs to be both qualitative and quantitative. And when it comes to quantitative, I developed an assessment called the strategic quotient, SQ. So we've all heard of IQ, we've all heard of EQ for emotional intelligence. So the SQ is your strategic quotient. And the strategic quotient is really built on those three A's that I mentioned earlier: the acumen, allocation, and action. So it's basically 80 statements that people go through, and it gives them a score. And so far, we've had about 3,000 leaders take it, and the average score is about 60 in the 60th percentile. So, and typically, and back to your point earlier, Shar, the acumen piece is typically the lowest score on average across the groups. Because I think, to your point, a lot of people don't understand that acumen is simply learnings that lead to new value. A lot of the organizations I work with, especially in the technology sector, are actually creating accountability for insights. So they're trying to create a true learning organization by saying, we want leaders at every level each month submitting 3 insights. So learnings that they use to create value either for their internal colleagues or for external customers. And then they share that on an intranet. And so each month they're looking at literally hundreds of different ideas that have created value. And so now, instead of being in silos and having great ideas here and great ideas here and great ideas here, they're starting to see those ideas and insights. So, back to your original point, the strategic quotient is a simple way to assess what your current level is, because as you both know, Sam and Shar, just because somebody's title is VP and somebody else's title is independent contributor doesn't necessarily always correlate with their strategic ability. So we want to do that quantitative assessment. And then I'm also a big fan of doing a qualitative assessment. So giving people a survey, asking them about their business, about trends and patterns in the market, about their most dangerous competitor, about how their customers' actions and thinking are changing, because that'll start to give us a window into how holistically they're thinking as well.
So our listeners out there are thinking right now, Rich, I mean, how do I get my hands on this questionnaire to take the strategic quotient? What do they need to do there?
Yeah, so there's a free version, a sample version on the website strategyskills.com. So you absolutely go there, take it. It's the sample version is free to take, and it'll give you your results immediately. There's one for your team as well, so you can see, is our team being strategic? So a lot of folks that are leading organizations out there, you can get an idea: is my senior leadership team being strategic today? So that would be a great start. And then if you want to take the full strategic quotient, that's available there as well.
Oh, great. And so what are some of the most interesting findings that you've had out of people taking that strategic quotient?
Yeah, so I would say that the big finding is, number one, people are saying that they're risk averse, so they don't want to take risk. But what we're also seeing in the data is that they're saying their company leadership wants them to be innovative. So one of the big disconnects that the data is showing is that our company leaders want us to be innovative, but then the culture is risk averse, meaning, if you do something and it fails, you get kind of put on that list that I'm not sure that they're really, the right person for that role or that job. So there needs, as a leader out there, you really need to be cognizant of, is our culture matching up with our strategy? Because culture and strategy are both very critical to have. You can't have one without the other. You've got to have both really solid. So again, if you say we're going to be, if innovation is one of your key values, as it is for many companies, you have to ask yourself, is our culture supporting that? Do we actually reward people for trying things and failing? So we've got to understand, does our culture support the strategy and vice versa?
Good thing. Yeah. So that it's good to have the enablement. The company has to enable the strategy to happen, of course, and I understand that. But it sounds like the strategic quotient is a way that people and professionals can assess their baseline of how their strategic thinking is now, and then perhaps they can grow upon that over time. So is there certain routines or exercises that you give leaders to build their strategic fitness to ensure that they're on that path to being more influential?
Yeah, so that's a really key point, Sam. So I'm a big believer that, and, there's been a lot of work on habits the last few years, atomic habits, the power of habits. And I think people understand that habits are important. And again, a habit is not built on doing something once a year. So to your point, I'm a big believer that we have to practice. A professional athlete typically spends 90% of their time practicing and, and 10% competing. But in business, it's really reversed. Many people are spending 100% of their time working in the business and 0% practicing, to your point, the skills that are foundational to their success. So one of the things I'd recommend for leaders, and I do with leaders, is say, let's identify the 2 or 3 behaviors and skills that are most important in your job. And then let's create a practice routine for those behaviors and skills. So once a week, you're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes practicing that skill set. And for a lot of people, that seems maybe, strange that I'm going to spend 15 or 20 minutes practicing asking questions or listening or facilitating a meeting. But the reality is that's how we get better. So to your point, I developed a strategic fitness system, which is an online platform that has 50 different workouts that leaders can practice in different areas. So that's a more substantial way to do it. But again, a simple way to do it is just figure out what are the 2 or 3 behaviors or skills that are most important in my role, and then what are ways that I can practice them. So I think anybody who out there who's been a musician in the past, who grew up playing the piano or the violin, if you were an athlete in high school or college, practice is key. So in business, it should be just as important.
Well, here's where my mind's going on that, because how you go into a gym, right? And here's my new year resolution, or here's my resolution. I'm going to lose 15 pounds and I'm going to get, some muscle tone. And so I start going into the gym and I work out, and I see nothing happening. You know, I don't see any results, but all of a sudden, maybe a month or two later, I start to see results. So it does become a discipline process of making those habits part of our routine and helping our leaders and our employees have faith that if we do these habits consistently and we improve and we keep working this fitness out, strategic fitness, and really work on it, we will ultimately see income. However, I do see sometimes we get impatient with those results, and I think we think it's going to happen overnight. But I'm also wondering, what do you think about some of the common strategic mistakes that we make in business when it comes to this? I mean, what do you see as more the strategic blunders, and what you've observed in your coaching experience, Rich?
Yeah, Shar, great question. So, just to build on that, one of the key things I see is, because like you said, it takes time to build those skill sets and muscle. I'm a big believer in creating a mini talent scorecard. So again, if you're a CHRO, if you're an HR leader, if you're a CEO, COO, create a mini talent scorecard for your people, but do it in conjunction with them. So sit down and say, okay, Shar, here are the 3 skills that are really important behaviorally that are going to drive success for you strategically. Let's say one is going to be setting direction for your team. So that might be one that we say, Shar, we're going to create a scorecard on that. So now what I'm going to do as the leader is each week I'm going to sit down and we're going to have a conversation. You're going to grade yourself from 0 to 3 on setting strategic direction that week or that month. And so you're going to say, I gave myself a 1 this month. So let's say 0 is, underperforming, 1 is average performing, 2 is a little above average, and 3 is, killing it. So you're going to say this week I did a 1, and I did a 1 because we didn't take time at the staff meeting to talk about strategy. It was all fire drills. So, one of the ways you can start to gauge it is what you're seeing on a weekly or monthly basis. So I'm a big believer, share a mini talent scorecard, pick 2 or 3 things. It might be leadership skills. It might be executive presence could be in 1, 2, and then have the person grade themselves on a scale of 0 to 3, sit down with them, talk about what they did, what they didn't do. And I'm a big believer that starts to transform that impatience into, okay, I'm starting to see some progress.
That's great. And Lisa, and of course, when they have those discussions with perhaps either their supervisor or their colleagues, or they can start to see some traction on and some success. And I think it brings awareness up with their colleagues as well, and that they're being more strategic and getting that traction. But now, one thing I just wanted to jump back to, Rich, is Shar's question around some of the mistakes that you see happen in this process. Is there, first of all, is there a common weakness that a lot of leaders have that they try to work on? And number two on that is that what are the biggest mistakes that they have to try to in resolving that issue?
Yeah, so the biggest issue I see in general is leaders saying, here's my strategy, and they don't have a strategy. It's not technically a strategy. So one of the big issues is folks will say, we want to be number one in the market, or we want to be, the best place to work in the country. And so they say, well, that's our strategy, but that's not a strategy. That's answering the second question. The first question is, what are we trying to achieve? How are we going to do it? So the first thing is, do we have a real strategy? And then secondly, to your point, a lot of mistakes come from not writing the strategy down. Just because it's in your head doesn't mean that everybody has the same understanding. We've all grew up with that telephone game where, one person starts with this comment and it goes to this person, this person. By the time you get over here, the comment is completely different because, we're translating different things to different people. So if you're a leader out there, you've got to write your strategy down and you've got to have your plan in writing. It's not good enough to have it in your head, no matter what size company you're in. Because look, if a coach for a Pee-wee football team can spend 6 or 7 hours a week creating a game plan, you can spend an hour writing down your plan. So you've got to be able to write down your plan. And then the other big mistake I see leaders making is not including their team in the conversation as to why the strategy is what it is. The research in the social sciences shows that if you ask somebody to do something and give them no reason, the compliance is about 60%. If you ask somebody to do something and give them a reason, then it's 93%. So the reality is, even when people don't agree with you, if you give them the why, they're going to be much more likely to execute the strategy. So again, as leaders, we need to remember we can't be so busy that we forget to have the conversations around strategy as well. And oftentimes, the people that work for you, even the frontline people, they're going to have a lot of great insights that you as the CEO or CHRO don't have because you're not on the front lines with the customers day in and day out. So again, just because you're the leader, don't think you've got to lock yourself in an office and create the strategy. It should really evolve from conversations and be more organic versus a kind of a command and control approach.
Well, this is fascinating because I definitely want to talk about the turnaround aspect, and I do think strategy in business is very vital. I did, in healthcare typically, which is a lot of my experience, we'd have the CEO C-suite, as we called it, that would turn over every 5 years, very commonly. And as the learning and development person, HR business partner, I had to facilitate strategic courses for our leaders and literally talk to my leaders about strategy and aligning our goals and aligning, the system, the region, the hospital, the all the way leader, the employee, all the way through the teams. And I had a real difficult time really helping the leaders translate how does a strategy align to a specific employee goal. This would have been a real aha. However, then let's go to the next 5 years, and we had a different CEO come into place. What was fascinating about that CEO's approach is he took the strategic alignment, the graph, which was beautifully done, and he put it on every single wall, every single cafeteria, every single break room, because he did not notify the blind spot, which is part of our discussion here, to realize that we don't even know what the strategy is. We don't talk about it. We don't have a language about it. Leaders can't even communicate it. So we, as the enterprise, need to show our employees what the strategy is. And so I thought that was genius. And believe it or not, we switched from one of the bottom hospitals out of 22 to becoming one of the best hospitals in the matter of 2 years. We hit almost all 11 out of 13 initiatives strategically. And so I thought that made a difference. That's a success. But so what would I talked about my beautiful strategy concept poster. What do you think would what kind of plans do you think that our leaders would really hit the mark as far as understanding what their strategy is and what physical tools or meetings or discussions? I mean, how do you have the leader understand that and really comprehend it, like my example there?
Yeah, so that's a great example, and kudos to you all for moving from 22 up to, the top two or three. That's exciting, and that does not happen a lot. So it's
Yeah.
great to see that. And like you said, you've got to be able to put the strategy out there. So, one simple framework that I use and I think is helpful to visualize, because I'm a big believer, Shar, like you, that it's great to visualize, is called a strategy scaffold. So we think about a scaffold for a building. It's basically used to, put up against the building to help support it and to provide some structure to it. And so in my strategy scaffold, I have three planks. So that the number one plank is purpose. And purpose comes in the form of mission, vision, and values. So as a good leader, we have to have that, because that's going to be the foundation of our culture. So that first plank is purpose, mission, vision, values. Be very clear, and especially make sure that your mission and vision and values are unique to you. If you can put a competitor's name on your mission, vision, and values, and it would kind of fit, then that doesn't work. You're not being unique enough with those statements. So that's plank one, purpose. Plank two is the business model. And a business model can be complex, but I break it down simply into three things. It's how you create, how you deliver, and how you capture value. So the business model can be done by any group in the organization. It's simply asking yourself, what do we do to create value for our stakeholders? How are we delivering value to our stakeholders? And then how are we capturing that value? So that's the second plank, is that business model. And then the third plank is your plan. And again, plan goes back to what we mentioned earlier with the GHOST framework, answering those two questions. What are we trying to achieve, and how are we going to do it? So the goals, objectives, strategies, tactics should be done both at the CEO level, everybody in the C-suite should have their own GHOST framework, and then the people below them should have their plans as well, because it should be a beautiful cascade from one level to the next, where everybody's working towards the same ends, but they're going to have different ways to get there. So again, that's the strategy scaffold: purpose, business model, and plan. That's a simple way potentially to think about bringing all those elements together.
Just a point of clarification there, Rich. Can we talk about how, that the element of capturing value? Can you explain what that means a little bit more?
Yeah, so it's a good point, Sam. One of the things I see, especially with internal groups like IT, finance, HR, is that they're doing activities because historically they've done them. But what they don't stop to do occasionally is ask ourselves, are all of the things that we're doing, the reports that we're producing, the meetings that we're having, are those all still generating value for the people that we interact with? And oftentimes when we do an audit, the answer is no. A lot of those activities, the reports, they're not adding value anymore. So the capture value piece, especially for an internal person, is are we creating, delivering value, and then are we capturing that in the sense that, are we changing things so that the people we're working with perceive the value that we're producing? Because oftentimes internally, if we're not good at communicating our value, then people take for granted what we do. And again, HR leaders, finance leaders, ops leaders out there, they know this. If you're not able to communicate the value that your team's bringing, then oftentimes the other business leaders will say, I'm not sure that maybe we should outsource that group. Maybe
Yes.
they're not bringing as much value. So the capture value is really, are you capturing value in the sense that you're identifying what the value really is, and then you're communicating that back to your stakeholders? That's
Okay.
the key piece. And then when you think about external groups like marketing and sales, or if you're the CEO, capture value is, if you're a product manufacturer, okay, let's say you sell stuff, But these days, you need to ask yourself, can we capture value in other ways? Should we start a subscription like Volvo, the car maker? Instead of just selling cars, now they have a subscription where you don't have to buy a Volvo. You can subscribe to a Volvo, one fee each month, and you can quit that subscription anytime you want. So when it comes to capturing value, it's both internal and external.
So I want to dive into that, a very important piece that you just mentioned. I mean, capturing value is really important, but ensuring that we're communicating that it can be even more important. So let me just back this up. So there's a lot of times where those that you're delivering value to don't understand or don't realize how much they rely on you, how much they're really getting out of that value. And so what is the best way for leaders and practitioners to communicate the value that they're delivering in a way that people understand it, appreciate it, and want more of it?
Yeah, the first step goes back to the idea that we're not order takers. We have to first have a proactive, intentional conversation with our internal stakeholders on what are your goals and needs. Not what do you want? I want this, emotional intelligence workshop, national sales meeting. That's fine. But what are your real goals and needs for your team? So it might be around development, or it might be around culture, it might be around business acumen. What are the real things that you want to see from a mindset and behavior and business performance standpoint? Once we know that, and we've really got alignment on the 3 to 5 goals, needs, behaviors that they want to see, now then we can go back, let's say as an HR team, and create a program to deliver on those things. Now, if we've delivered on those things, to your point, Sam, we're going to go back and say, you told us here were your 3 goals at the beginning of the year, and that here are the initiatives that we've developed. And then here is both quantitative and qualitative data. So maybe we interview some of the people that we worked with internally on business acumen, and they say, Shar created the best business acumen course because now I can go out, I better understand, I'm more of a consultative seller. And so I've got some qualitative feedback, and now I'm going to look at quantitative as well. So are there some quantitative measures, objectives that we can look at also? So I think that's the key thing, is looking at both qualitative and quantitative, and really understanding the goals and needs up front, and getting clarity and agreement on what those look like.
Perfect. Well, Rich, this has been really this has been a rich conversation. No pun intended there. And the amount of information that you've given us over this past 20 minutes is substantial. And I know there's people out there that want to dive into more, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what are the top things that you want our leaders that are listening into this conversation to take away with them today?
Yeah, especially so for the leadership group, I would ask you one question. How clear is the direction you have for the organization, for where you're going? Whether you're the CEO for the next 5 years, or whether you're an HR business partner, do you have clear direction for your team? Research by Gallup over the last 30 years with 10 million managers shows that only 22% of employees think that their leadership team has set clear direction for the business. So the main thing is, as a leader, you have to have clear direction. So back to Shar's made a great point earlier, get your team in a room, talk about what is our strategy, what is our direction, answer those 2 questions. What are we trying to achieve? How are we going to do it? Get that clarity. And then Shar brought up a great point too, with the idea of create a poster with that strategy on it. Visualize that. Put it in people's hallways, in the meeting rooms, in the conference rooms, in the cafeteria, because people need to understand the direction. If you've got direction, that's going to build both confidence and competence. So meaning people feel good about where you're headed, and they also have the skills and the tools, and they know how to get where you're trying to go. So to me, that's the biggest thing that people are lacking, is that clear direction.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rich. So for our listeners that want to know more, I know that you have a lot of books out there, and what book is going to be the best one for them to start with based on what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so the best one would be Strategic, which is just came out last November. I've got a Harvard Business Review article that's based on that as well. So if you're an HBR subscriber, you can look that up. But the book Strategic probably be the one that would be the most comprehensive.
Okay. And then the next question is, how can they learn more from you and get involved in your programs?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, we've got to be able to share and give things away to help everybody be strategic. I mean, that's my vision, is to teach the world to be strategic. So if you visit strategyskills.com, so strategyskills.com, I've got lots of different articles, white papers, infographics, videos, audio stuff that's free. Because I'm a big believer that, we've got to start somewhere. And again, I'm a big believer that if we're all acting and thinking strategically, we're going to make our lives a lot easier, a lot more efficient, and a lot more effective for everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for sharing your wisdom today. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I mean, one that has been one of the most enlightening for me, and I really want to dig into all your material, and so I'm going to be reaching out to you in the near future for sure. But thank you
Yep.
so much for being on the show today.
And
Yeah,
Rich,
thank you,
I'm going to
Sam.
go out and look at your tools. I do have to agree. I could have used you when I was a talent management strategist in a big corporation. Honestly, I think this would have been the key to really make a true. I did make a difference, but I think this would have really gone above and beyond. So I would say any leader or HR professional, really take a look at your resources. So thank you so much for today. Great discussion.
Thanks, Shar. I appreciate it. And thank you, Sam, as well. Great conversation, great questions. So really appreciate being with you today.
All right. So
Thank
for
you.
all you listeners out there, we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Take care.